Assalamualaikum and hello everyone.
Waalaikumsalam.
Waalaikumsalam. Good morning.
Before we begin, let's introduce ourselves first. My name is AINUR SYAFIKAH binti KAMARUL ZAMAN and I will be the moderator for today's discussion.
My name is BETRISHIA binti Muhammad NORHISYAM.
My name is ELS254 binti ZAINAL.
My name is Aisyah Humaira binti AHMED FAIZAL.
My name is SURAYA binti ZAKI.
Today, we will discuss the importance of terminology tools in translation. First, terminology refers to specific term used in a particular field, such as medical, legal, or technical field. This term has specific meanings, so they cannot be translated freely. For example, in medical translation, a term like diagnosis has a very specific meaning and it must be translated accurately to avoid misunderstanding. This shows that terminology is very important, especially in professional field. In translation, using the correct terminology helps ensure accuracy, clarity, and consistency. If the wrong term is used, it can change the meaning of the text and confuse the reader. The purpose of this discussion is to understand why terminology is important and how it affects translation quality, especially in terms of accuracy and consistency. Our agenda for today includes 3 main points. First, we will look at different terminology tools. Second, we will discuss their advantages. Third, we will discuss their limitations and challenges. Let's begin with the first question. Can anyone explain what terminology tools are and how they help translators? IRDINA, would you like to start first?
Thank you. I will explain what terminology tools are and how they function in translation. Basically, terminology tools are digital tools that help translators store, manage, and organize specific terms. These terms are usually kept in something called a term list, which works like a personalized dictionary created by the translators. This is very important because in translation, especially in technical fields, one term must always be translated consistently. For example, in engineering or medical text, even a small difference in wording can change the meaning completely. So, terminology tools help translators avoid that problem by making sure the same term is used again and again correctly throughout the document. One good example of a terminology tool is called MemoQ. MemoQ is widely used by professional translators because it not only stores terminology but also helps manage translation projects efficiently. In MemoQ, translators can create their own term list and save specific words along with their meanings, definitions, and even usage examples. This makes it easier to maintain consistency, especially when working on long or complex documents.
Thank you, IRDINA. That's a good explanation. Now let's move on to BETRISHIA.
Thank you to moderator, and I agree with what IRDINA said. These tools are especially useful when translating large documents because they help maintain consistency and accuracy throughout the text. For example, if a translator is working on a medical report, they can save specific terms like hypertension or diabetes in the system. These terms are often technical and must be used precisely to avoid misunderstanding. By storing them in a terminology database or translation memory, the system can automatically suggest the correct translation whenever the term appears again. This does not only speeds up the process but also reduces the risks of errors. This also ensures that the same term is used correctly throughout the document. As a result, the final document becomes more reliable, professional, and easier for readers to understand, especially in critical fields like healthcare. A good example of this can be seen in Google Translate. Although it is not a full terminology management tool, it still demonstrates similar functions by remembering commonly used phrases and providing consistent suggestions. It can quickly translate repeated terms and help users maintain a certain level of consistency. However, it is important to note that tools like Google Translate may not always produce accurate translations, especially for technical or context specific terms. Therefore, human checking is still necessary to ensure the quality and appropriateness of the final translation.
Thank you, Betrisha. That's a great point. Now let's hear from Aisyah.
Yes, I agree with Betricia. In addition, tools like SDL Trader Studios and MemoQ can automatically suggest translation based on previous work that has been updated in their database. This makes the translation process faster and more accurate as they are being handled by a system that can work quickly and give us fast results as well. So ultimately, using translation tools will assist translators efficiently and also save a lot of time for those who are busy. Well, that is, as long as the chosen tools are official or trusted, it would be a big help toward translators worldwide with these translation tools. And that is all from me.
Thank you, Aisyah. That is very clear explanation. Now let's move on to Anis.
Thank you, moderator. I also agree with Irdina, Patricia, and Aisha early statement earlier. So I also believe that terminology tools are specialized software used by translators to manage and control the use of specific terms in translation work. Their main function is to store terms and their correct translation in a structured database called a term base, which is explained by Irdina earlier. This allows translators to quickly find and reuse the correct terms when needed. For example, tools like Trader Studio and MemoQ allow translators to create a term base where specific terms and their translation are stored. For instance, the English term for software must consistently be translated as Parisian in Bahasa Melayu. Once this term is saved, then the system will automatically suggest Parisian whenever software appears again in text whenever the translator want to translate from English to Bahasa Melayu. Another example that can be explained in medical translation, terms like heart attack should always be translated as serangan jantung in Bahasa Melayu. Terminology tools ensure that translators do not accidentally use a different variation, which could confuse the readers as well. Overall, this example shows how terminology tools function to maintain consistency, improve accuracy, and speed up the translation process, especially when handling specialized or repetitive terms. That is all by me.
Thank you everyone for your explanation. All of you have clearly explained what terminology tools are and how they help translators. Now let's move on to question 2. What are the advantages of using terminology tools? Patricia, what do you think about this?
One of the advantages of using terminology tools is consistency. When translating documents, especially with the technical ones, it is very important to use the same terms throughout to avoid confusion or misinterpretation. When using tools like Google Translate, it can help maintain consistency by providing the same or similar translation for repeated words or phrases. For example, if a term appears multiple times in a document, the system often suggests the same translation, which helps standardize the text. This is useful for general or semi-technical documents because it saves time and ensures the translation is more consistent. However, users still need to check the accuracy, especially for specialized terms, to ensure the meaning is correct. That is my take on the advantages of using terminology tools.
Yes, Patricia gave very good points about the advantages that these tools are accurate and they are consistent because they would suggest us words that are simple yet give the same meaning as well. So I would like to add another advantages of these tools, which is efficiency. These tools, like I've said before, using them, it would save time for the translators because them as translators, they don't have to repeatedly search for the same terms over and over again. The software will suggest the correct translation automatically. So again, it saves time because it's quick. Plus, as these tools have been fed a lot of data from translators all around the world, they will be able to provide the most suitable answer or even give us various options to choose from so that the translators can pick the words according to their own preferences. And other than that, this way, different translators can also portray different ideas and explanations despite using the same tools to translate their work. And that is all for me for the advantages.
Thank you for Betrishia and Aisyah earlier statement about the advantages of terminology. I would also like to add that accuracy is one of the advantages of terminology tools. In translation, accuracy is actually very important in order to preserve the original message intents, tones, and technical meaning in order to prevent dangerous misunderstanding in specialized fields like medicine or law. Terminology tools reduce human errors because they rely on previously verified translation documents. As an example, tools like SDL Trader Studio work together with terminology tool to provide real-time term suggestion while translating. The system will continue to recommend the correct translation after a specific term has been approved. In addition, this accuracy also supports the consistency mentioned earlier by Patricia because once a term is confirmed then it will be used repeatedly in the same way throughout the document. It also improves efficiency as mentioned by Aisha since translators do not need to double check terms that have already been verified. This is very important in fields like medicine or law, where mistakes can be serious where they use a specialized term in during translating. What about you, Irina?
I would like to add another point about the advantages of terminology tools. In my opinion, one important advantage is better productivity and good time management. This is because tools like MemoQ allow translators to work faster because they don't need to search for the same terms or phrases repeatedly. Everything is already stored in the system and the software will automatically suggest the correct translation. This is very useful when working on long documents or tight deadlines. In addition, MOQ also supports team collaboration. For example, in a translation project involving multiple translators, they can share the same term base. This ensures that all translators use the same terminology, which improves the overall quality and consistency of the final translation. So it is not only useful for individual translators, but also very effective for teamwork.
Thank you everyone for your point. Now let's discuss the challenges. What are some limitations of terminology tools? Aisha, would you like to share your opinion?
Alright, in my opinion, I would say one of the challenges or limitations of using terminology tools is that these tools can be quite expensive. For example, Google Translate, you can use it for free, but sometimes it does has its flaws and sometimes it is limited. So translators would look for a more trusted and official websites to translate from. So most of those trusted websites, you would have to either subscribe to their page or hire a professional or official translators to pay them to for them to do your work. Other than hiring a personal translator, software like SDL Trader Studios requires a paid license, which may not be affordable for students or beginner translators. Additionally, the website Termbase also uses a system where you can hire or pay official or trusted translators to do the work for you, and it would not be suitable for students who may not have an income yet and would of course struggle to pay the subscription. And despite all that, we also need to be aware of the offers these websites give to us, because we must read it thoroughly so that the amount that was paid for the subscription and the result that we will get will be fair and also affordable. Although this issue can be fixed by having parents or individuals with income, they can assist these translators who are struggling to pay with the subscriptions. So yes, in that way we can pay for the subscription and settle their work for the translating process. And that is all from me.
I very much agree with Aisha's point. The limitations of terminology tools can be quite expensive. Either it is a subscription or maybe limited to files, pages, or words. And for me, is the limitation for terminology tools is the learning curve. Some terminology tools are complex and require training to use effectively. Users need to learn how to create term bases, manage translation memory, and apply the correct settings, which can be confusing at the beginning. Beginners may find them difficult at first, especially if they are unfamiliar with translation software or its technical features. As a result, they may take longer to complete tasks or make mistakes when using the tool. However, with practice and experience, users can gradually become familiar with the tools. What do you think, Anis?
I actually agree with Aisha and Patricia early statement for the limitation of using terminology tools in terms of cost and learning curve. However, I'll also like to add that one of the disadvantages of using terminology tools is that it depends heavily on the quality of the term base. If the term base contains incorrect, outdated, or inconsistent database, it will the tool will continue to suggest incorrect translation, where the translators may follow this suggestion and produce inaccurate translation. Since SDL Trader Studio integrates with terminology database, it will automatically suggest terms from the term base during the translation. If the terms are incorrect or poorly maintained, the translator may unintentionally use the wrong terminology during translating the work. In other words, the is only reliable based on the data stored in it. Furthermore, translators still need to critically evaluate the suggestion first given by the system rather than relying on them completely. Human judgment remains important to ensure that the selected terms are suitable for the context and the purpose of the translation. That is all by me. What do you think, Irina?
I also agree that there are some limitations when using terminology tools. One limitation is that these tools depend heavily on the quality of the data entered by the translator. If incorrect terms are stored in the term base, the system will continue suggesting those incorrect translations. This means that the translators must be careful and always check the accuracy of the terms they save. Another challenge is that tools like MemoQ can be quite complex for beginners. There are many features such as term-based management, translation memory, and project settings which may take time to learn. At the beginning, new users might feel confused or overwhelmed. However, with practice and experience, these tools become much easier to use and can significantly improve translation quality. Lastly, even though terminology tools are very advanced, they still cannot fully understand context as humans do. So translators still need to review and edit their work carefully to ensure that the translation is accurate and appropriate. That's all from me.
Thank you everyone for your participation and for sharing your ideas throughout this discussion. In conclusion, terminology tools are very important in translation. They help improve consistency, accuracy, and efficiency. For example, by using this tool, translators can ensure that the same terms are used throughout the text, which helps avoid confusion and misunderstanding. However, they also have limitation. For instance, some tools can be expensive and may require training to use effectively. In addition, they may not always understand context correctly, so errors can still occur. Therefore, translators must use these tools carefully and not rely on them completely. Overall, terminology plays a crucial role in producing high quality translation. While terminology tools are very useful, they should always be used together with human knowledge and judgment to ensure the best result. I think that's all for today. Thank you everyone for your participation.
Thank you to
Thank you,
moderators
Ainur.
and
Thank you,
everyone else.
everyone.